Okay, so this
Great.
Hangout is live on it. If you want, we could just do a test run to see if we can see this on YouTube after, in the name of getting it right first time.
Yeah, so video should be up now. Can you see that? So, am I showing live?
Yeah, very much
Great.
so. So what happens is when I stop speaking, and if you say something,
it'll flick to me. Hello. Yep, the propensity to cycle tool. Yep.
Okay.
All working.
So that's really good. So should we just quickly?
Great.
Do you want to check the video from that first, or should we just go straight on with it? I don't know if you're recording at your end.
I'll just see if I can. I'm recording audio.
Okay. I mean, I think we can. I think it's a safe assumption that it'll work. And as you say, even because it's a podcast, even if it doesn't, it doesn't matter that much. So yeah, should we just crack on with it then?
I think we can. Yeah, I have a live yellow box in the corner, so that's fine with me. Well, great. I'll start off with. I prepared a few questions just beforehand, and just to because what we're trying to get across is for someone who knows nothing about this at all. So it's almost starting from scratch. So we can give some questions which are fairly simple, and then give an explanation there. And I'm sure that will evolve into a few more conversations, but we can get going from there. But as a probably an opening starting point, what is it that you've created, Robin, with the toolkit?
Okay, so what we've created is, in the broadest sense, it's an online, interactive, publicly accessible transport planning system. That's quite a big claim, but it's got a lot in there. It's certainly the main feature of the Propensity to Cycle tool is an online map. So I'm a quantitative or computational geographer by training, and we were given the brief by the Department for Transport to develop a model, a system for identifying where there's high potential uptake for cycling. And because we realized that this is transport planning has always got a kind of public engagement aspect to it, we decided to make the results of it publicly available for everyone. So that's the key feature of it that's new and different from previous tools for transport planning. It's not a full 4-stage transport model. It's designed to solve a specific problem, which is where to create basically new cycling networks and strategic routes. So it's not about junction design. It's about the high level strategy of where do you build your network. And it's also about visioning for the future. So this is where the public engagement side of it comes in. We can actually create a model that shows what percentage of people in a particular area could feasibly cycle to work based on the distances that they're already doing. And we're showing that in a regional level, so we can know how many people in a particular region will be going. And amazingly, we can also estimate what that would look like at the road network level currently for commuting. But we can show, and I'll do a demo later on, we can show on roads how many commuters, so, you know, to the nearest 100, say there's like currently 100 commuters using a specific piece of the road network, we can estimate what that would be under a given scenario of change. So that's in a nutshell what it does.
Fantastic. So at the starting point, if you wind back straight to what was the initial challenges that you were looking to solve by, and right, this is the right way to go forward?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. I mean, the first challenge was that this had never been done before. So we had to make some design decisions, primarily about how to take this out, well, primarily how to do it on our own computers, which I can do quite easily because, you know, that I'm trained formally in GIS and computing. But the major challenge was how to get that onto a public-facing server so that not only can I do it on my computer, anyone in the world with an internet connection can also access this planning tool. So the way I looked at this was just by keeping an eye at up and coming software projects. So I'm very interested in various open source software projects, and I've used Leaflet quite a lot, which is a JavaScript library. And at the same time we were writing the bid for this, there was a R interface to Leaflet that was developed, also called Leaflet, confusingly, developed by RStudio, which is a group of very proficient R programmers. So based on a beta version of that software, I said that we would be able to implement this and allow it for other people to use. So this was, in my view, pretty cutting edge stuff, and to some extent we took quite a gamble in that software being able to work and being production ready. That was back in that was the beginning of 2015, so we've had 1.5 years of building this and developing it, and I still think we are quite a long way ahead of the game. So just getting that on a public facing server was the first start. We used this software called Shiny, which is an R package for making interactive web applications in R. And we learned how to use that. And then finally, the final challenge, which we're still solving, is how to scale something like this nationally. So those were the three main challenges: how to get it on a public facing server, how to get an interactive model, and how to make it scale. And that's when it becomes a big data challenge. And it's quite a technical project, but I can go into as much technical details as necessary, but I suspect from a civil engineering perspective, the most important thing is how it works and how it can be used, I imagine.
Absolutely, and I guess from our perspective, it's we represent civil engineers as well as other transport professionals. Did you have an image in your mind of how civil engineers would use this, and was there any was it tailored towards that particular user in the first place, or was it generally local authority practitioners, maybe planners, rather than the civil engineers per se?
Yeah, I mean, my vision for the tool is that it can enable decision makers. It can provide decision makers with a solid evidence base, and an evidence base that is consistent from area to area. So, I guess my kind of vision of the typical use case would be local authority transport planner who doesn't have access to all these high-tech transport planning tools. Maybe he doesn't have the software, maybe he's not been formally trained in it, to enable them to use evidence easily and make decisions based on the best available evidence. Now, the interpretation of a decision maker is quite broad. The Department for Transport's view on that is that it's local authorities, but in fact there are a number of stakeholders involved in the transport decision-making process. As you say, engineers, and I think it's really important that engineers have access to the best available evidence, but also kind of lobby groups and cycling campaign groups are often kind of making statements about where they think it would be best, but they don't have the evidence. So the idea is, if we make this evidence available to all stakeholders, we can have a more informed debate about where new infrastructure goes and what that infrastructure should look like. There's obviously quite a lot of tension between different stakeholders want different things, but if everyone starts with the same evidence base, what we found is that it can lead to better decision making, essentially. So local authority decision makers primarily, but then a whole constellation of decision makers, and the public can use this tool to see where cycling has the greatest potential to grow.
So starting from scratch, how would approaching this tool, what would be the first thing that a person would use if we think of it in a demonstration mode? How would they go, right, I want to input cycle infrastructure and need to provide some evidence for it to inform decision makers. What do I do first of all?
That's a very good question. So again, without going into the live demo, and I think it would be useful to do that later, but without going into that, the first thing to look at is current cycling rates. There's no doubt about that. So where is cycling currently happening, and what's going on in terms of using counts, so using screen line counts and other sources of data about where people are currently going. That way, you've got to ensure that your current cyclists are catered for. If there's people cycling and there's no provision, then something needs to be done. So that's the first port of call. And the Propensity to Cycle tool does that by the first map that you're shown tells you what percentage of the population cycle to work in your region. The next stage is to think, okay, well, these are the areas where people are cycling, so we definitely need provision there. The next stage is to say, where are they going? So it's easy to say, in this region, a lot of people cycle, but you may not know whether they're going north, east, south, or west. But if you know where they're going, then that is a very important next stage, which I think our model has solved to a greater extent than other nationally scalable models. It can actually identify where these desire lines are. Then you want to allocate it to the road network. And finally, you want to create scenarios of the future, because transport engineers don't want to build for yesterday or the 2011 census, they want to build for tomorrow. So given a realistic scenario of cycling uptake, where is the most potential for growth? And you want to build in those areas that have very high, sometimes unmet potential, so you can get the highest benefit from your investment in cycling infrastructure. So those are the stages I'd go through.
So I guess that kind of leads me on to my next question. So it would about being what the benefits of using the toolkit above other systems so far, or traditional planning methods. So just what extra does this bring into the planning system?
Yeah, that's again a very good question. So I think primarily it's something that is uniform across all of England, and if we do it for Wales and Scotland and other countries, it provides a uniform decision-making platform that if I run it in Plymouth, it is based on exactly the same evidence as if I use it in Sheffield. To the best of my knowledge, transport planners currently don't have this kind of uniform evidence base. So it means that we can compare two areas. It means that if we train people in using it, they can use the same system to generate plans in any area. So that's number one, the fact that it's uniform across all areas. And that really solves quite a big problem in the sense that local authorities find it hard to collaborate and share information and data. Secondly, it's all based on open data, and we're actually making data available to local authorities. So in the tool, there's a download section where you can download the data and share it with other people. You can incorporate that data into your GIS department, and then you can do your own analysis based on the outputs from the Propensity to Cycle tool. I'd say that's quite an important one from an engineering perspective, because you could read that into your GIS system or your CAD design system to look at where the kind of places where there's most potential on the road network. Thirdly, which I think is potentially the most interesting, is that it's publicly accessible. So what we think we've done is remove the barrier for access to transport planning from up here, where you need formal training, you need specialist software, and you need a big computer, to anyone who's got a web browser can actually access this evidence base. So the fact that it's available to the public is really powerful, and it means that local authorities can justify their decisions to other groups. So they can say, look, this is where we're going to build a new bike path. And if there are objections, which there will inevitably be, they can say, just look at this tool and you can see for yourself why it's there. And that has the additional benefit of kind of encouraging democratic debate and informed debate about what the direction of transport planning policy should be. So those are the three main advantages, and I think each of those is new compared with existing tools.
Yeah. I saw one of the settings was based on the 2011 census data. Obviously that it's every 10 years that the census will be. Is it able to cater for updates in that analysis basis, so reviews, and will that data be fed into the national picture?
So I guess that kind of links to another advantage that I forgot to say, which is really important, which is this is completely open source software. So all of the scenarios are kind of open, and the method to analyze them is open source. So in the first instance, people can reproduce our analysis and generate new scenarios. If you have a particular data set, it would be possible to input that. So yes, and we're already kind of generating scenarios in the future, but as you say, that's based, to be clear, on 2011 travel to work data. So we know where people live and where we work, and we draw desire lines between those origin and destination pairs for 2011, and then we can estimate what the uptake is. I think that's a valid approach because houses and workplaces don't tend to just get up and walk around. They tend to be fairly static objects. So these travel patterns have a high level of inertia. So it's fair to assume that those travel patterns will be similar. However, there is obviously a very high potential for new developments to happen, new housing areas to be constructed. And that is an area that we're looking into. So there is definitely potential, but this is something that's on the horizon within 6 months. This is kind of like not quite blue skies, but this is midterm planning. The second thing to say on that is there are new sources of data that are coming online. So we're obviously using the best available evidence, which is the 2011 census. I think we're completely justified in using that. However, if we can get access to big data sources on travel patterns, there is a very high potential to use that as an input into the propensity to cycle tool. And the one that I just flag on that is mobile telephone data. So when you've got your mobile and you move from place to place, the mast that you're connected to will change every few hundred meters if you're in a densely populated area, or every kilometre or so if you're in the countryside. From that, mobile telephone companies are already creating origin destination matrices. They own this data. If we can somehow leverage that data, we can use that as a greatly updated kind of starting point for estimating potential. And the big advantage of that is that it's not just travel to work patterns. We've got all trip purposes contained in the origin destination data generated from mobile telephone companies. And this is something that the Welsh Government is investigating and investing in. Highways England is looking into using this data, and I really hope that due to the benefits, they will make some of this data available to us so we can update our model with the latest data.
Great.
Yeah.
One of the things as well about the toolkit that was really interesting was the Go Dutch setting. Do you see that as being an aspirational setting of what people can use, or the potential that could be unleashed in different towns and cities with that particular setting?
Yeah, I mean, so as a modeler, my job is to provide the best available evidence, and it's a decision-making process that has to go on to decide which scenario we're aiming for. As it happens, I think cycling has many advantages, and I would advocate ambitious targets like Go Dutch. And what's great about Go Dutch is it's ambitious, but it's definitely not blue skies thinking. In the Netherlands, there are cities with more and lower levels of cycling use. So our scenario is far less ambitious than what goes on in a city like Groningen, which has got 60% of trips in the city by bike. It takes the average cycling behaviour of Dutch culture for a given trip distance and then applies that to English travel patterns and English hilliness. So the age-old thing of, oh, it's too hilly here, well, our model kind of shows that our model is quite, it reduces potential quite dramatically in hilly areas. So it shows that if we had the same kind of propensity, I guess, to cycle as Dutch, this is what's possible based on current travel patterns. And in West Yorkshire, which currently has one of the lowest levels of cycling in England, it shows that that it's possible just by primarily people travelling up to 2 to 5 miles by bike. We could get over 10% of people cycling without changing travel patterns, without changing demand patterns. So yes, it's a very interesting one, and I think it makes sense to have this kind of long-term ambition rather than just saying, you know, a 2-year plan, a 3-year plan. This is really thinking big and long-term, and that's what's missing in planning for sustainable transport. Usually the road strategy has a 50-year plan, and it's about strategic thinking. So all of this was coming from the Department for Transport as well. It's a kind of well-known problem in cycle planning that whereas other areas of transport have joined up long-term strategic plans, cycling tends to be quite ad hoc, stop-start funding. So this is hoping to tackle that problem using a tool for imagining ambitious scenarios in the future.
Yeah. Since its launch was in July, wasn't it? It has there.
So that was the internal launch for the Department of Transport. Yeah. We're still waiting to put out a big press release, and the Department for Transport is going to press release this. It was delayed due to Brexit, so
we can't call it Dutch anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not officially out to the public. This should be happening fairly soon, within the next week or two. So I suspect it would make sense to coincide this with the public launch of it, where press releases go out and more people will know about it. So that's just a point of clarification there.
Good. Thanks for that, Rick.
But to continue that clarification, we did present it to the Department for Transport. We presented it to the Junior Minister for Transport, Andy Jones, and it got received very well. It was very well received by the Department for Transport, and we've presented it to loads of local authorities who overwhelmingly say this will be useful when they're developing their funding bids and their strategic cycling plans. So it's really exciting times at the moment.
Yeah. Good. It's all good stuff. Well, my question was going to be: is there any evidence of it being used so far? And the next one was, how would it be supported and promoted? But as you just said, the Department for Transport will be looking to launch this and give some promotion behind it.
Yeah.
What would you like?
I mean, I can say one more thing on this. I believe that the Transport for Greater Manchester is using it. I'm happy for that to be on record. That people in Transport for Greater Manchester have used this to inform their plans, and that's really fantastic to hear. So I know of at least one place. I also know of a case study that Phil Jones Associates have used this to improve their plans. So I'm happy for that to be on record as well, that Phil Jones Associates would be happy for me to say this. So to some extent it is already being used, but I mean, I don't know beyond those two examples.
I guess that would lead me to the question, are there particular areas which are very difficult for something such as this to be able to come in? Obviously, Manchester is very much about sustainable transport at the moment. London, we've seen huge growth in cycle traffic. It's the rest of the country which seems to be lacking behind, apart from those large metropolitan areas.
I think that's a very perceptive question. So, yes, and one of the limitations of the model is how it deals with rural areas. So it's based on medium super output areas, and the size of these areas gets bigger because they're based on population. They get much bigger in rural areas. So in rural areas, it's not so good at kind of identifying where a strategic cycling network is. At the moment, you're right, it works best for large cities. I don't think whether or not the city has seen strong uptake in cycling affects how useful the tool is. I think the tool is equally useful in somewhere like Liverpool or places in the north of England which have seen less uptake than other areas. So I don't think the current rate of cycling doesn't affect its use, but certainly whether or not it's rural, that certainly is something we're working on. And in a new version of the tool, we're looking to solve that problem by simply using smaller areas in there. So yeah, that's a very good question.
Great. With that as well, would it be possible to give a quick demo of
Yeah, sure thing. So I'll just get this onto screen share mode. And I can see I've got one. Here's one I made earlier. So as I say, it has been quite a while in the making, this thing. And it's really fantastic to get it at a stage now where we can present something that covers all of England, which was the contract for national deployment with the Department for Transport.
Yes.
And it quite an interesting little anecdote is that we submitted a paper to peer review that said that, you know, presented the ideas behind this tool, and one of the reviewers' comments, and in it we said, well, in future versions we hope to scale this nationally. And one of the reviewers' comments is like, I think you should retract that statement, because this is far too ambitious to try and scale this nationally. And then in the resubmitted version of the paper, we could say, well, sorry, we have to rebut that question, because we already have scaled it nationally. And it's like, here it is. So this isn't the tool itself. So the first thing that you see on the landing page, which is www.pct.bike, is an overview of England. And I think that is actually really important, because it shows that this isn't just solving the problem in one area. It's not about, you know, making one city have high cycling and forgetting about the rest. It's actually about a national strategy, and this is the direction we need to be going in. It's not the tool itself, as I say, but it shows what the spatial distribution of cycling is at the moment in terms of cycling to work, which is quite a good proxy for cycling overall. So if I scroll over West Yorkshire, which is the region where I'm based, you can see that it's only 1.3%. That's the region with the lowest current percentage. Then I can go down and scroll slightly to the east, and I can see in Cambridgeshire, 9.7% of the population said they cycled to work. So massive regional variation in there. So this really does give an overview, and it encourages strategic thinking in terms of transport planning. Rather than instantly zooming into a specific junction, I think it makes a lot of sense to start with this overview. So that's the first landing page. Then the next stage is to click on one of these regions. So to actually initiate the tool, we have developed the tool to work at a regional level. And the reason for that is that transport decision making and funding, especially for something like cycling and active travel, happens at a regional level. We spent quite a lot of time thinking about what the appropriate spatial resolution for these regions is. We could have gone down to local authority districts, and that would have just been Leeds, which I don't know if, can you see my cursor in there?
Yes.
That's roughly, if I draw a box around there, that's roughly a quarter of that area. But actually, going back to the wider point about we need joined up cycling strategies, we decided to make these regions bigger. And that also coincides with national policy developments, which are encouraging, I guess, more regional plans, and coincide with the shift in emphasis to combined authorities. So this is something that transport planners and transport engineers need to be aware of, that these kind of the big picture of how this thing's unraveling. One thing as well to say about the front page is that we've got an interview, but that's more like a public facing thing. So in terms of what engineers are interested in, I imagine it's getting into how this tool actually works. So I'll continue with that, unless you've got any questions at the outset about where we are so far.
That's fine, thank you, Robin. Oh,
okay, great. So
I will ask,
yeah,
is with the methodology, is this something which can be applied to other places outside England? So I know you mentioned Wales earlier, but
most definitely.
Yeah. Good.
So, I mean, this actually links to why I'm in Spain. All of us on the team, and we're a multi-university team from Cambridge University, University of Westminster, and London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. All of us are looking for international case studies, and the methodology certainly scales. And this is the fantastic thing about open source software. We don't have to deal with any licensing issues. We can just say, look, we've built something. As long as you've got the right data, it's possible. So I'm in Spain at the moment, looking at their transport system, and I'm presenting this tool in Seville tomorrow, where they've had fantastic uptake. So basically, yes, anywhere where you've got good quality origin destination data, this method and this tool or a version of this tool could be used. So it's quite exciting and really important to get that message out there.
Good, thank you.
Okay, so going back to the tool itself anyway. So again, in the same way with the front page map, you can see the percentage who are currently cycling. And that makes sense as your first port of call. If you're going to focus investment, well, a good starting point is to know where people are cycling, either to say, well, let's cater for existing cyclists, or even if it's to ask, why are people not cycling here? So you can see in the vast majority of these administrative zones, and just to clarify, what we're looking at here is medium super output area or middle super output areas. Each of those contains roughly 7,000 people. So they are medium-sized administrative zones. In the vast majority of them, less than 1% of them currently cycle to work, especially in Bradford. You've got very, very low levels of cycling here. So that's the first thing it shows. And, that's useful. It's a way of exploring the data. If we want, we can click on a zone. So Leeds 76, which is near Pudsey, it's got 3,389 commuters in it, and 45 of those said they cycled in the 2011 census, so quite a low number. Interestingly, 68% drive, so that's not drive or share a car, that's people who usually drive to work. If we click on the area with the highest level of cycling, which is Leeds 109, which is in Headingley, of 5,702 commuters, you've got about 5% cycling. So you can see instantly you've got quite an interesting geographical spread. What you don't know from the current map is where these guys are going. So if you were to build a cycle path, you wouldn't know instantly, unless you know the geography, where you would build. So the next stage to show is where these desire lines are going from and to. So you can see now you've got a series of red lines, and we call these desire lines. These are lines connecting workplaces with residential zones. And what's interesting is that because if you build a cycle path, you must build it in both directions. We've actually aggregated these in both directions. So these are both directional flows, and I can click on one of these and it shows that even though 5% of commuters in a particular area travel by bike, the percentage on a particular desire line is much higher. So 8% of the 1,000 odd commuters between Headingley and Leeds city centre are currently commuting by bicycle. So that's really useful information. So again, you need to make sure that these current cycle flows are well catered for first. And if there are any areas where there are not, that could be a priority. So does that all make sense in terms of?
Yeah, very good.
Okay, so before we move on to kind of looking at visions of the future, I'm just going to show a couple of features on the user interface. So by default, we show the 30 most cycled routes in the map. We can increase this, so by moving this slider, and that will put more lines on the map. The reason that we set it at 30 is because it can become quite overwhelming to have all of these desire lines, and sometimes you want to focus in on a specific area. You can see also that there are lines outside leads. So a really cool feature that I think would be useful for civil engineers is that you can isolate the tool just to work in the area that you're interested in. And the way that you do that is that you click this freeze lines button, which is a genius feature added by my colleague Nikolai Burkhoff. If I untick this, it's subtle, but more lines have appeared on the map. So if I zoom out again, there are no lines anywhere else. So we're completely focused in that leads area. And then because we've frozen the lines now, it will hold the analysis to that current extent. So that's a really useful feature. The next really useful feature is that we can allocate these flows to these desire lines to the road network. So if we remember those 1,000 commuters who are going down, we can actually estimate if they were to take the fastest route, which is a reasonable assumption for commuters who tend to take the most direct route within some level of uncertainty, we can estimate the precise pathway that they would take based on current infrastructure. So this isn't a predictive method. This is saying hypothetically if they were to take the fastest route. It's not saying that this is the quietest route, or it's not even saying that this is particularly appropriate for cycling. We're not passing judgment, but we're saying based on an algorithm that was developed for cyclists, this is one of the fastest routes. What's also really interesting is to look at where the quietest route is. So the next option in the cycling flows drop-down menu is the quietest route. So we can see, fascinatingly, what the difference in distance is between the fastest route and the quietest route. And we can see here, if you go on what's called the quietest route, you're going almost 30% further. And that's a big disincentive for cycling. If you don't want to mix with traffic and you want to take the quiet route, if it's much further, that's quite a disincentive.
Yeah.
So there are all of the different levels of visualization so far, and that, just to clarify, this is all based on existing data. So we haven't invented any data. And just to clarify as well, it's worth saying you can download this data. So if you're interested in the tech and you like using GIS, you can actually click on the lines tab and you can see all of the raw data. So we're big advocates of open access data, and we can click on one of these links, and just to clarify what you get here, you can probably the most useful one is a GeoJSON file, and that allows you to load the data into a geographical information system such as QGIS, and then you can do your own analysis based on that. So that's the next thing to say. So are there any kind of questions that come to mind just as a visualization tool for looking at current travel flows?
No, it seems very good. It's so then the planner would then take this data and then present it to within their plans to kind of develop which areas most need structure.
Well, still, I would say not. I'd say at the moment this is more useful for exploring it and kind of exploratory analysis. So the final layer that I've not yet shown, in terms of, let's say just hypothetically, the aim of the local authority is to cater for cyclists currently. The final thing that you would want to show is when you aggregate all of those lines, and we can increase this quite dramatically up to 200. Basically, it looks like a bit of a mess because there's so many routes. It's very difficult to decipher what all that information means on the map. Can you see that? You've just got loads of lines. So the final layer is which is possibly the most important one for from a transport planning perspective, is the route network layer. So once you have all of the fastest routes on top of each other, we've simply aggregated them to show what if everyone were to cycle on the fastest route, what would the total number on every major segment on the road network look like. So you can see there, you've actually got what looks like quite an intricate road network, and you can click on any segment of the road network and it will give you a number, and that is the number of commuters from all origin and destination pairs who could be using this specific piece of infrastructure. So I'm currently looking at Otley Road, and there's almost 500, so that suggests that there's already quite high demand, and we haven't even gone into the scenarios of the future. So assuming that you're building for current cycling, the local authority would take this and identify places where you've got a big discrepancy between cycling demand and cycling provision. So that's what it's about doing. And you could use this, especially if you downloaded the data, as a way to systematically evaluate parts of the road network which are not well catered for compared with current use. So that's based on the current data. This is based on current travel patterns. The really, really, really exciting thing about the propensity to cycle tool is that we can go through every single stage in that process, in that visualization process, for various scenarios of the future. So I'm going to go back to simply showing actually, before I do, because we're talking about visualization, I think it's worth saying something about the zonal data we can show. So if I remove this show zones tick box, you suddenly see the base map underlying it without the percentage currently. So that allows you to focus on the route network, which is probably what engineers are going to focus on. That other than parking, cycle parking and showers, which are obviously very important, cycling infrastructure tends to be linear features. So by removing this show zones, we can see with much more clarity the road network, and we can zoom in to very high level. And this is why we decided to use a kind of interactive map, so you can zoom right into a specific road. Like here I'm looking at York Road, and we can also look, we've got different base maps. So if you're an engineer, you might be interested to know how much space you've got to play with. So we can go onto the satellite layer and really see what's underlying this particular piece of the road network, and see how much space we've got for cycling infrastructure. So you can do that all over your area, and this allows you to do it on a web browser, which really reduces the barrier to access to this kind of data, or you can download it and kind of incorporate this into your own CAD or GIS systems. So we think this is going to be really useful for both local authorities and consultancies who are using these kind of data. Another thing to say quickly on the base map is that we can also get an indication of the kind of demographics. And interestingly, travel to work certainly seems to be quite dominated by certain socio-demographic groups. So we've also got this index and multiple deprivation layer, which allows you to see how cycling demand intersects with socio-demographic data. Yeah. And you can see that large parts of the south and the east of Leeds have deprivation, they're deprived areas. So, you know, that is something to take into account when planning for cycling. And I'm not going to make value judgments about how to do that, because that's not my area of expertise. And we've also got hilliness in there. So there's quite a lot of information going on in there, and it's really good to be able to explain that step by step. And again, this links back to your question earlier about training. So I think it's going to be quite important to really show the potential of this. But yeah.
That's probably one thing. I mean, it seems fairly easy to use from my perspective, but will there need to be an element of training for the user, or will they be able to pick this up quite easily?
I think it makes a lot of sense to have training workshops. I mean, it's always the case that when you're developing something, you take it for granted and you think, oh, everyone should know, but there's no reason why you should know how to use this from first principles. So I think that training events and also kind of knowledge sharing is really important. So because it's open access, there's no reason why. So this goes back to the issue of it working nationally. If someone from one local authority becomes very proficient in using it and has demonstrated ways of using it effectively, they can easily transfer this information to other local authorities because they're looking at exactly the same user interface. But I think there is going to be quite a lot of demand in seeing how to use it from people who are proficient in it. And at the moment, that's probably to some extent the responsibility of the Department for Transport and myself and others on the Propensity to Cycle tool to engage with people who are interested in using it, and also to explain its benefits, but also to explain its limitations. It's not a golden bullet. It's there to assist the transport planning process, not to replace the planning process. So we're very we're very strong in stating this is just a tool, and it cannot provide all of the answers. It should be used as part of a kind of democratic process, I guess.
Yeah, so it's there as an exploratory tool for the planners and the users specifically. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So what we've been seeing so far is an exploratory tool, and it's a way of exploring the best available data, which I think everyone can agree that we should be making decisions based on evidence. We should have evidence-based policies and evidence-based designs for infrastructure. So the point, to reiterate, is it really is important to invest where there's high demand and where people are going to use it. So this goes back to, should we invest this much money on this road, or would it be more cost effective to build in another place? And more importantly, how can we build a cohesive network that will join up all of the routes that people want to do? We're currently showing travel to workflows, and that kind of prioritizes arterial routes into the centre. So when we add future layers, like travel to education layer, the network would look quite slightly different. But again, it's about strategic planning. But in terms of where this potential for future growth exists, this is where using the scenario drop-down menu comes into play. So we haven't it's not even a model at the moment. It's just presenting existing high-quality data on travel patterns. And we can click on a line, and there's no debate about that data. What's the next stage for transport planners to use is imagining what the future could look like. So the question in my mind, looking at Leeds, is it that there is high cycling rates in the north of Leeds simply because that's the only place where short distance trips are going? Or is there some other reason? Is there some barrier to cycling that's stopping people from other parts of Leeds travelling by bike? And that's what we can show with the scenarios. So shall I say a few things about that?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Robin. Okay,
just hurry me up if I'm going on too much, but I think there's a lot in there that is worth talking about. So the four scenarios very quickly are government target, which is represents what would happen if cycling were to double in following current patterns of preference for short distances and hilliness. So it increases most where you've got very high numbers of people traveling short distances in flat areas. So, you know, we really haven't made that many, we haven't made a big leap of faith in that. And as I say, this is, compared with Go Dutch, quite a conservative scenario and not that ambitious. It shows doubling, but it doesn't show a doubling everywhere. So in places where you've got high potential, it will show more than a doubling. So to pick one desire line, we've gone from 1% to 5%, even though the overall national picture will be for a doubling. And what it does is it shows how the spatial distribution of cycling can shift. And you can see that the overall level of cycling has shifted, and also that cycling is higher near city centres where trip distances tend to be lower. My favourite scenario is Go Dutch. So this scenario shows what would happen if we had Dutch propensities to cycle based on current travel patterns. And what's fascinating is you can see the blue area surrounding Leeds city centre has very high potential, but when you move out to the countryside, the potential is less. And this shows how it's a bottom-up model operating on the origin-destination level. And the final thing to show quickly is how that translates to the route network. So when we take all of this model and all of the changes in origin in desire lines, we can start to see how the route network could look like in terms of the number of cyclists using different parts of the travel network. So I can click on a specific node or a link on the route network and see in this place it could go up to over 3,000 commuters. And this is just between zone cyclists. So there may be demand for interzone cycling that we're not taking account of. And I think that layer, the route network layer, under scenarios of the future, is very, very powerful in informing transport plans.
Yes, it is. Yeah. This is all really good stuff, Robin. And when is the DFT planning to promote this? Did you give a date of when that's expected?
So I don't have a date at the moment, but all I can say is I think it's very likely that it will be within a month. So we need to. This is an ongoing discussion, and we need to get clarification from the Department for Transport. So as I say, we think they are planning a press release on this. Yes. So it's that question that is out of our hands at the moment, but it's certainly imminently, I think. Yeah.
Great. I mean, the one thing I could do, I mean, just from here, it's having a demonstration of how the tool works is quite a powerful thing. I'm just wondering whether outside of this, you'd be interested in doing a webinar to offer some training on that with us, or with some of the other institutions as well, to give some advice to our members on this, how to use the tool and how it can benefit. Interested in?
Most definitely. I think. Yeah. We've talked in the team about, who's our target audience, and there's a wide range of stakeholders and people who are interested. And we've actually done a hackathon for Liverpool cycle campaign. But in reality, I think the most important people to present it to are the people who are actually going to use this and actually build stuff, because this is actually about building cycle networks. And at the end of the day, that is an engineering question. And I think, to some extent, civil engineers are possibly one of the most important audiences to know how this works. So I would be really keen to present this to your members.
Great.
Yes. And there's also one of the people in the Leeds teams is a civil engineer by training. And we've talked about doing a write-up of this from an engineering perspective. So I think there's big potential to kind of communicate this through various ways. I think the fact that it's an interactive tool really lends itself to this demonstration and training. So that would be the first port of call, but also we're interested in doing kind of articles and stuff, and also working with local authorities. So yeah, yeah, definitely.
No, that's great. I mean, I can see there's many different avenues we could take to help promote this, but it's a really useful tool, and I think people would value it. And obviously, that one of our main objectives always is people who are interested in cycle infrastructure tend to be interested in cycle infrastructure. It's how you reach those people who do things in a traditional way and kind of spell out the different ways of doing things and the opportunities that are available. So I think that's something we'd be very happy to help communicate, actually.
That's great. The audience that we want to reach out to as well is like transport modelers who have years and years of transport modelling experience, that this would be very useful. And yeah, that's certainly the direction we want to take this.
Great. Well, thank you. And thanks for taking me through this today, Robin, as well, and taking more than an hour out of your time, actually, to kind of do this recording. The one thing I would like to ask at the end is whether at your side you had that, you were recording on the phone as well, on the rec forge. Not a problem if you weren't.
I wasn't. No.
Right. That's okay, because I was picking up.
Apologies.
It's okay.
I'm hoping that Google Hangouts is doing that. So
great.
All I can say is fingers crossed. But I think I'm really confident that this is a good group of people to present it to. So I'm actually happy to do future talks, or if you need higher quality audio just for your podcast, I'm happy. Fingers crossed it comes out well, but obviously we don't know. I don't know what the sound quality is like your end. So
the sound quality was quite good, actually. There was a bit of a breakup every now and again when there were some whistles in the background quite a lot as well. But that's never a problem. I mean, whenever you do an outside broadcast, you will pick up things from outside, so that's okay. I will obviously, the plan with the podcasts I've done in the past is to edit that down into trying to get those key messages across. So to try and be a bit, try as hard as I can to be Radio 4 on a budget. So it's I will edit that down, but I'll of course send you a copy of that prior to publication, so you can have a listen, or say it hasn't come across quite strongly. When are you back in the UK? Are you in Spain for much longer?
So I'm actually going back to this being quite a software, I think, cutting edge software project. I'm actually here for a week-long summer school, which is called Geostat, which is where a load of geospatial software developers meet up in Spain. I'm going to that conference in Albacete, and that is from the 18th to the 25th. So I'm back in the UK on the 27th of September. So I'm here for most of the rest of the month. But I'd just like to say, if there's any aspect of it that didn't come out clearly or you'd like to go over, I'm very happy to do to kind of go over that again and talk about specific parts that we did cover, or about which there wasn't good sound.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that, Robin. It's I think you've broken a little bit now. Can you still hear? Hello.